Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 26 of ZK Live. I'm Zach Kenney, and today we have on Ty Crowder from Total Finishing Supplies and Solutions. They are a large distributor of a bunch of things related to applying paint. We're going to talk to him about this paint sprayer setup that we have that we're going to be trying. We're going to be heating paint and running it through an air-assisted airless. He's a very knowledgeable guy as it relates to all things coating application. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him on now. Hello, sir.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. About yourself?
Good. I thought you were out on like a beautiful deck, and that was the background in the back.
I wish, right? Just the office picture.
Love it. Where are you from?
I live in San Diego, California. Spent about 20 years up in Portland, Oregon in the rain. Got tired of that and decided why not move to the Sunshine State. So I've been here for about a year and a half.
Wow. Did you bring your company with you?
Yeah. So the company actually is kind of unique in a way that we have customers all over North America. We're very West Coast based in a lot of it, but we have customers in Mexico, Canada, the East Coast, actually even a couple in Europe. We've also started a new partnership with a company out of New Zealand to do some of our high production manufacturing and some distribution into Australia and New Zealand as well. So we're all over the place.
And what exactly do you do?
We sell any kind of equipment that you might need for finishing. So it can literally be sanders, air compressors, spray guns, pumps, ovens, conveyors, robotics, automation. My old tagline used to be everything from a pressure pot to a robot. That was what we did.
I definitely have some questions about the robots. We'll get to those.
Excellent.
So how did you get into the business?
My dad was a painting contractor. He's been doing it for almost 50 years. He's actually still active. You'll see a few of my posts actually feature him sometimes. And so I started actually finishing cabinets when I was 10 years old. I was absolutely hooked when I first saw what I did to wood by spraying lacquer on it. And I've been fascinated and into that industry ever since.
Well, I commend you for getting into the end of the industry that you've gotten into. It's probably, it's a bit different and probably a little more profitable, I would hope.
I think we all have our struggles in the industry to make it work, but we're doing it.
I'm sure. But I would imagine you have a little bit less competition than your father has.
Yes, that's probably true. There's a lot more painting contractors out there than equipment companies.
Yeah. So I just recently saw one of your posts on one of your Instagrams, and I was able to buy a Kremlin spray tip like through the phone, through the internet, very quickly and easily. That's what first brought me to the world of Total Finishing Solutions and Supplies. Tell us a little bit about Total Finishing Supplies and what that's all about.
Okay, so I have two websites, and in fact, the second website came about during the COVID lockdown, right? So my primary website is totalfinishingsolutions.com, and that's really focused on the capital equipment. If you want a spray booth, if you want automation, the bigger ticket items. But I found I was also at the same time trying to sell, cabinet door racks or a spray gun or a tip, and it just wasn't really fitting on the same website without it looking junky. So over the COVID lockdown, we built a brand new website, and it's called totalfinishingsupplies.com. There's links back and forth to both websites if you're on either one. But the supplies website is strictly focused on consumables for the painter. Like I said, growing up in this business, I understand there's never been an easy source where can I get cabinet door racks? Where can I get the little tip cleaning needles that everybody needs? Where can I get, all those things that are specialty to our industry? And I'm trying to put those all packaged into one source, and also go out and find new equipment that I think everybody should be using because it'll help better yourself, like surf prep. I think you're a big fan of that as well. The fast rack equipment, we've got those for the racks for the door painting guys. So we're trying to put everything in a convenient place. You brought up the Kremlin tips. We actually have aftermarket replacement parts for Kremlin, Graco, Binks, and a number of others. They're made in Europe by a aftermarket company to actually higher standards than what we would see Kremlin typically have, and we're selling them free freight anywhere in North America on their tips, for instance, for $79.99. That's I think the current tip is $103 from Kremlin plus shipping. So you're saving quite a bit, and we have everything in stock. And our whole model is we're trying to be very fast, very good customer service and response. When I started, I wanted to be
a huge gap in the market.
Yeah,
back in the market with what you just said right there.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I was very excited that I had a Kremlin tip 2 days later for $80.
Yeah, glad to hear that. And
you know,
it's opened the doors for a lot of things. Look at us, here we are sitting now, because you got a tip that was easy to buy, and now we're talking about spray guns and booths and robots, and we're talking to the ZK audience. So I'm very, very glad to be here.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about paint heaters. I wish I had the opportunity to use it already. Unfortunately, I haven't. But for those of you guys out there listening, can you tell us about the setup that you sent us?
Yeah, so I sent you the Wagner 1840 pump, which is the Wildcat. So it's an 18-to-1 ratio air-driven pump, 40 cc's per stroke or per cycle. So that's why it's called 1840. And then it's got the GM 4700 air coat gun, which in my opinion is the best air-assisted airless gun on the market. I know Kremlin gets all the hype. It's a great gun. I've sold them for 20 years. But once I saw this gun, it blows it away. There's no wear parts under the cap. The tips are reversible. It sprays better. There's no consumable parts per se to be using on that gun. So it doesn't eat you out of house and home for maintenance. Then what's coming to you is the inline stainless steel explosion-proof fluid heater. So what that is going to do is really change your world. I've been using paint heaters for 15 or 20 years. They're incredible. All coatings are thixotropic, which means that they change in viscosity with agitation or heat. Agitation is actually the reason why a double atomizing or dual orifice tip works. And it's a good example to get in your head as to why thixotropic properties are advantageous for us. Ketchup is a great example of a thixotropic coating. You turn the ketchup bottle upside down, nothing happens. You take your fist, right, and you bump that neck of the bottle, you've agitated the coating, it thins instantaneously, and it all runs out at once, right? We've all experienced that. That's thixotropic, and that's an example of agitation. A double atomizing tip or ultra series tip does the same thing. At that last second before spray, you're agitating the material, it thins slightly, and we see a better result in finish or a finer finish. A lot of people think, oh, it got atomized twice. No, it was agitated right at the last second before spray, and it reduced in viscosity for you because it's thixotropic. So that's a great example that we all use and we know, but we just don't commonly think of as to why it works.
I thought it was, don't ask, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I did think it was being atomized twice.
Yeah.
Until you talk about it out loud and realize that it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, going through a hole twice shouldn't do anything for making it get smaller. It's the agitation that thins the thixotropic property of the coating. So heat does the exact same thing, only better, right? So a good example is we've all heated oil on the stove. I like to fry my taco shells, right? So when you start out, glug, 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 it's thick oil that you pour in the pan. You turn that heat on and that oil gets what? Really thin, like as thin as water almost, right? So the heater does the exact same thing to paint, only you're not adding solvent, you're not adding water or whatever the carrier might be. So your solids are going to stay absolutely as high as they are when you get it in the can. but you're going to control the viscosity by temperature. And I'm not talking like 200 degrees. We're probably going to run 110, 120 degrees, maybe 130 on some very stubborn coatings. But what we do is we call it the viscosity curve. So there's a point at which you no longer add heat, you don't get any more result. You want to run just below that point, and that's essentially it. Some coatings are a little sensitive to heat, but as a general rule, I'd start at 115, see where you're at, go up and down 5 degrees at a time, and check it. But it will make your coating spray as though you thinned it 20% with thinner, but it's going to flow out and level and build because you've added absolutely no solvent whatsoever.
I'm very excited for that. Now, in order to find that curve, are you just like heating it in some way, testing it, and then testing the viscosity with the Ford No. 4 cup till you find that? Do you need to do that?
No, it's really kind of hard to do because as soon as it leaves the gun, it's actually cooling, and you're not going to get a very accurate result. The easiest way is really just a little trial and error. Like I say, a rule of thumb, I'd start at 115. If you're seeing an ill result, turn it down 5 degrees. If you're thinking, hey, I can get it to flow out just a little more, go up 5 degrees at a time until you're comfortable. If you start to see tiny pinholes or bubbles, it's too hot, right? So just cool it back down. But you're not trying to boil this paint. You're just getting it nice and warm like the hottest day of summer.
Yep. We have used crock pots in the past to try to heat up paint.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very imprecise way of doing it. And like you said, once you take it out of the crock pot, it starts to change temperature right away.
Yeah.
But we've a number of people have tried crock pots in the past.
Well, that I often see is people go on like to Granger and they buy those belly bands that go around a drum or a 5-gallon pail. I'm not a fan of those either. Number one, those are normally not explosion proof, so there's a hazard. Number two, they get super hot. They're not really well regulated. And as the volume in the can decreases, the temperature spikes, and you can easily burn the paint. It also heats from the outside, so that's hotter, cooler to the center. So unless you're really agitating it well, you don't keep consistency.
So that in the post to advertise this show today, I posted a picture that you had of a 55-gallon drum of some sort of a water-based primer. And can you tell me about that setup and why that primer and why that setup and just what went into that whole thing?
That particular picture was from a steel door manufacturer that paints 300 or 400 steel doors a day. That primer is very, very viscous. In fact, if you put a stick in it when you first open it, it's almost like mud on the bottom. It settles out and hard packs really bad. So we have a very heavy-duty 10-to-1 gear drive agitator with the big heavy-duty blades that gets that going. They let it stir for probably half an hour, and then we put the suction rod in. That is a Wagner Cobra pump, which a lot of the wood finisher guys all kind of revere as the Cadillac of pumps. But it's not no wearing parts. There's no packings in there whatsoever, and it doesn't have any friction on the coating. That goes out of the Cobra into the inline fluid heater, picks up the temperature out to the spray gun. So you do have to spray for a few seconds in order to get the warm material out, especially if you've taken a break or set it down or something like that. But it'll work great.
So now, why that primer? I'm interested. Why they're going through all that effort to agitate the paint for 30 minutes and run it through a paint heater? What were the benefits of that primer that you want to even? That? And how come I'm not using that?
So primer? In that particular case, there's a VOC requirement where they're at. They also want to get a very high build of primer because they don't top coat the doors. They just ship them out pre-primed and then they're coated in the field. It's very specific. But they also don't want to dilute it with water because they're not going to get the build. of that primer. So heating it was an ideal solution to get the flow and coverage balanced out.
Okay, that makes sense.
And in a
So,
factory setting, you walk in at 8 a.m. and the coating viscosity is the same as it is at 1 p.m. It makes a world of difference because you're putting out consistent product all day long.
which in a factory setting, that's great, but that's just as important, if not more important, in a site, on a job site setting. It's just that we don't generally, my trade doesn't do a lot to be very meticulous about controlling our environment. And maybe we don't have as many tools as a factory would to control environment. That's one reason why I really like the idea of this is, we know what the temperature of this paint is every time. We know what we're thinning it to, versus when it's different temperatures outside and the gallon is a different temperature, and then I thin it the same ratio of thinning every time. I'm getting different. It's actually thinned differently based off of the temperatures outside. This way, we have more consistency. So that's one of the reasons I'm excited about this.
We used to have a bit of an inside joke when I sold industrial coatings. If it was a nice day out, we'd say, oh no, it's 70 degrees and 50% relative humidity today. All kinds of paint problems are going to happen. Because every time we got a complaint and you asked the contractor, what was the temperature? Oh, it was 70 degrees out and 50% humidity. It was perfect. And you're like, uh-huh. But it's true. Like everybody has all these different formulas and concoctions for, oh, it was cold. I got to put this solvent in. Oh, it's too hot. I got to slow it down and retard it. You've got all these different variables. The consistency of temperature so that you're always putting out the same temperature all day long, that all goes away.
Now, I primarily, like the first project we're going to use it on is going to be an oil-based coating, but I can clean out this pump just like I would clean out any pump and then run water-based coatings through it as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I always recommend anytime you're going to go from solvent or oil to water that you run a bipolar solvent through the pump before you switch to water, run clean water and then the coating. An example of a bipolar solvent would be acetone or denatured alcohol.
All right, good. When you said that, I got scared, but that's what we do.
Yeah.
Bipolar.
Thinner in, and as soon as the water hits it, you'll see like it turns white and starts kicking out. That's an example of solvent floating out of water. So if it dissolves into water and you can't see any difference, then it's bipolar into the water. So acetone is usually a very good choice.
That's what we usually use, acetone.
Yeah.
Okay. So that opens up a whole nother, so there's a number of water-based coatings that like to be a little bit thin. I'm excited to see then how the 2K polys spray, the water-based 2K two-part polyurethanes, heated, because right now it's the best finish that and I think it's kind of unanimous at this point that airless sprays those best. But airless on airless on verticals is tough. So if I can get the air-assisted airless to lay it out like an airless and be able to spray with it, I might just put paint heaters on all my sprayers.
It's going to change your world. And the paint heater is a little bit of an investment. I mean, I think as a package, it's around $3,000. And that kind of throws some guys back, and it's also kind of big and heavy because it's got a big heat cord. It's got to heat up. You're trying to heat fluid in a very short amount of time. But what it does for you, I think you're going to be the perfect candidate to show, this bubble of the sector of the industry, what this is going to do for the paint contractor.
So I found this handy new feature. I can put the questions up.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I can see that.
So somebody,
go ahead.
Verbalize, because this is going to be a podcast. Does the paint heater run off 120 or 220 volts?
It is available in either voltage. The most common we sell is 120 volt. I believe it's 15 amp draw at 120 volt.
Okay, and then someone else asked a question that went right along with it, but I cannot remember. Oh, I was gonna throw two up at once. All right, so we're gonna plug it into a 120 volt,
Okay.
and we're gonna spray 2K poly with it, unthinned, and it's gonna lay out better than if it was not if we used a non-paint heater and the same sprayer.
Absolutely. So one thing to talk about, you and I have never really discussed this. When it comes to two component and heat, heat accelerates all reaction times. Okay. So the normal general rule of thumb is every 10 degrees, your pot life is cut in half, right? So what's your pot life on the poly that you're talking about?
Oh gosh, I think it's 3 hours maybe.
Okay.
My guy, 3 or 4 hours.
You may want to be running that heater more around 95 to 105 just because you don't want to over accelerate your pot life. So you can run heat with two component. That's not an issue, but I want to, forewarn people that, hey, when you heat things, it accelerates.
But it's heating it after it's been brought into the pump and it's going down the line. So the batch of paint isn't actually heated, right? Like
No,
we were going to spray it out of a
the heater goes between the gun and the pump, so it's in the middle.
yes. So my hopper of paint will have the same pot life.
Yes, yeah, it will.
So actually, it really won't affect us.
You just have to be mindful
Don't
of
leave it on.
it,
Yeah.
right?
You
Heater.
start spraying, spray, finish, clean.
Correct. Don't go to
Which is
one
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, you your paint line is much more likely to seize on you.
Correct. If you get
Okay.
too. Yep.
Okay. Is there a thermostat? Oh, let's put up these questions if we can. I'm gonna try to do this more often. The right painter said, "Does it have a thermostat to keep consistent temperature?"
Yes, there is a numerical thermostat, and there's also a light that's, I think it's red, and it clicks on. It shows you when it's in, heat on, heat off, as the thermostat clicks on and off.
Oh man, I couldn't. I've been excited about this, but it's just been something like it's like coming one day, and I'll deal with it. And now I'm getting real excited.
We'll do another little special when you get this thing fired up.
There's no question. I can't wait to do the tests. Someone had asked the question. I think it was actually written. Yeah, how do you do it when it's part A and part B? High-end painting. Did that answer your question, high-end painting? Did we just answer your question? I think that probably does. You also sell equipment that sprays like part A and part B that like mix like
Yes,
outside of the gun?
absolutely. If you go on our Instagram page, you can actually see several examples of that. And also on YouTube, we have quite a lot of videos on that as well. The Wagner Twin Control is probably one of my favorites for that, where you have a pump for A, a pump for B, and a pump.
Don't really have any use for that, right?
What's that?
Guys like me, like there's no two-part coatings that I'm not using because I don't have that gun, right?
You would probably, if you had a big enough job where you're going to be into something all the time, if you were a garage floor painting contractor, something like that, where you're always, hey, I'm spraying epoxy or I'm spraying this one urethane all the time. Yeah, I've actually sold a few pumps like that to that. Also, the very industrial painting contractors on site, the guys that are doing like bridges and water tanks and things like that, they buy a lot of plural component because every coating that they use is actually 2K.
Brushworks, I believe the pump heater is about $3,000. Now, can you attach the pump heater to an airless sprayer? You can, right?
You can, yeah. It's high pressure rated. You can go on totalfinishingsupplies.com, and I believe it's under liquid equipment. You can find it, or there's a little magnifying glass. You can just type in the word heater, and it will pop it right up.
Yeah, so we're going to be using it with an air-assisted airless right now, but there's nothing stopping you from using it with an airless.
No, not at all.
But it might bring air-assisted airless back into giving the highest level finish to water-based coatings. Right now, I think that airless puts out a better finish with water-based coatings that we use because that air is like accelerating the drying and not letting the paint lay out. I'm not sure if that's true or not. That's just how I've always felt. And if it's laying out better because it's warm, maybe we can get the same level of finish with an air assisted that we can with an airless.
Yeah. There is also another level deep, if you want, as well on air assist. There is such a thing, and this also works for pressure pots and conventional guns. There is such a thing as an inline air heater as well. So you can actually heat the atomizing air. We do that a lot on robotic systems. The air is always controlled as a variable, right? Everything's controlled on that level of finish. There again, it's actually even a little more expensive to heat the air than it is the inline fluid. But if somebody was doing a lot of conventional gun work or HVLP gun work, that would work. In fact, you guys are aware of this. A lot of times when you're using like an HVLP turbine gun, which I'm not a huge fan of, but there's a market for it. The turbine actually heats up and you get hot air out of it, and you've all seen that it makes the paint look better because you're thinning it with hot air.
Yep. So, someone asked before we get past it, can the heater ignite fumes, i.e. acetone?
No, it is explosion proof, so it's rated for a class 1 div 1 environment. Obviously, if you're going to be putting acetone through it, I would say turn the heater off, but no, it's not going to cause a spark. It's contained.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I see Steph here from Pro Image. She sprays a lot of Fine Paints of Europe Eco, and we don't because I'm never able to get the finish that I'm looking for. An air assisted airless, and so the idea that I can heat my paint and get a better finish, there's so many reasons why I'm excited about it. In the sales process alone, just like the ability to sell that we can apply coatings in a way that almost nobody else can, is exciting as well. To be able to get some of the products that we're using to perform at a higher level is definitely exciting. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to kind of kicking the door open on the contractor industry and taking the new technology to it.
Yes, and that was a question. Here we go. I'm having fun with these questions. Jake Bresson said, what percentage of your market is made up of residential painters?
Of my particular market?
Yeah.
Very, very little. The majority of my customers are manufacturing companies. So we do stuff for like Fender guitar, Oakley sunglasses, Geldwin window and door, big kitchen cabinet companies. If you go to any Home Depot or Lowe's and you're looking at the cabinets that they sell in there, all those manufacturing companies buy from us. So we're really more into that high production. But we get a few contractors, cabinet shops, and smaller. Well, I would say we probably have 15% of smaller shops that we work with, but every customer is important.
Yeah, and now with the new website, you can better serve guys like me.
Yes.
Just the ability to. So you mentioned something earlier that you just sort of glossed over, but I'm not sure that every contractor is aware that they make little tiny needles that fit in the tips of flat tip, like in an 08 tip. There is a needle that will fit in there and clean it out.
Yeah.
Correct.
And if you don't have one, you don't know, it's a lifesaver.
Once you get your first set of needles, it will change your world. Anyone that doesn't have that should definitely go on totalfinishingsupplies.com and get yourself a little needle pack. What would they search?
It'll actually pop up right on the main page as a featured product. That's like the most common thing that people order.
Yes, those little because you lose them all the time, and they break.
Yep.
But
they come
we have one with like they run with all of our air-assisted airless machines, and they stay there. And like I was told to leave them in the tip when you're not using them, which I wish we did it. We don't do that. But the ability to take a little needle and clean out your tip is tremendous.
We also have hoses of every diameter, size, and length, and we'll even do custom for high pressure or low pressure or air. We have fittings on there like you can't believe, like swivel fittings, the fittings that you can put your inline filter for like a gun in, Y fittings, which are very rare. Like if you want to branch and have two guns come off of a Y. I've really tried to, over the years, keep track of all these little widgets and then put them in one place. So they're all there. If you spend a little time and search, every page, there's a lot of stuff to see there.
That's the kind of stuff that when we go to our local Sherwin-Williams and Benjamin Moore stores, they don't have that kind of stuff. And that's where I didn't know that they made those little needles until I bought a Kremlin. And then the guy was like, yeah, you don't have any of those needles around? And I was like, what do you mean? There's a needle that goes in the tip and cleans it and is made for it and won't like damage it. So I like that you've put that together. I'm going to keep looking at those little things. I like the idea of because once you've seen the swivel, say on like a Kremlin, the swivel is so nice that when you go look at your airlesses, I'm going to need to put those. I didn't realize you sold them. I'm going to go put those swivels on my airless guns because they are so much nicer than anything you see on an airless gun.
Well, and I'll tell you something to look at too. So the Kremlin puts a swivel on the fluid. Why not both? So like on the Wagner, the gun I just sent you, when you use it, it has a swivel on the air and the fluid. And once you've seen that, you never want to go back. Putting it on both is absolutely.
Yeah. It's so freeing. And I don't know. I mean, I get it that when they sell the airless sprayers at Sherwin-Williams, like they have to be very price point conscious because that's what people are looking at. Right. But guys, I mean, so many painters use their sprayers all the time, and the wear and tear and that annoying having to turn the gun all the turns to get the line to straighten out. I still do that with an airless. Why I have to look to find a swivel?
Yeah, there's a swivel for any airless gun. It's on our website. Not a problem.
That's amazing. I'm gonna be buying some swivels tonight.
There's I probably shouldn't say this because I'm gonna get blown up, but on TotalFinishingSupplies.com, there's a little message on the bottom, like you can talk to somebody live. They go straight to my phone. So anybody who wants to ask a question, if you can't find something, I'm the guy at midnight that's answering your questions.
See, I love that. That is a solid competitive advantage right there. Yeah, and that's what I like to. And I think Eric Reason or someone. When I went to Total Finishing Solutions, then I found out Ty Crowder was the guy. I had heard of you before from somebody, but just the fact that you're accessible to guys like me and all the painters that are on here, I think is a huge asset. And I hope to see that website do well because I know I'm going to be using it a lot.
Well, we are celebrating. We had our 100th order today, and the website's about 50 days old. So we're stoked.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Let's see. I have some more questions. Here we go. This is fun putting them up. Jake said, why don't MSDS say what temperature to make the paint?
Well, because the paint companies have to make an assumption of the temperature. So if you ever look, a lot of them will say apply at 70 degrees Fahrenheit at 50% relative humidity. So that's what they're saying the paint temperature is, because in a lab, they have to assume a fair medium as to what environment it'll be put into. Okay.
So we're going to push the limits on coatings, and we're going to find out. Before we go to the job site, I'm going to take it to the shop, and we're going to try to break the paint and see how hot is too hot and what it looks like.
I have another question for you, just because you said something earlier about you think you're getting the better finish with airless versus air assist on some of these coatings. that shouldn't really be possible, but I see something in the market that happens all the time. I'm going to pick on Graco a little bit. They have specifically and very well targeted the contractor market with the AirPro 395 AirPro, whatever they call that thing, where it's basically 395 airless and it's got a tankless compressor on it. It's really a disservice, in my opinion. Disclaimer, hashtag whatever, right? That air compressor is so underpowered, it actually doesn't even meet the specs of the gun that they sell with it.
I noticed that.
And all these guys think they get kind of a bad taste in their mouth about, oh, air-assisted airless, it doesn't work, or it's not the thing, like I don't get the atomization. No. Throw that air compressor away. Get something that has, 6.5 minimum CFM. I prefer you get closer to 8, but I know in 120 volt power range, that's hard to get. There's actually one on my website that's at 7 CFM. Makita makes one, and also Roll Air makes one that are both in the 6.5 CFM range. And you want to make sure that it's also a continuous duty cycle when you look at compressors. A lot of guys get confused on that. They see 100% duty cycle and they're like, oh, that's great. What that means, 100% duty cycle means if you're on for 1 minute, you have to cool for 1 minute. A 50% duty cycle means if you're on for 1 minute, you have to cool for 2 minutes. So you need to find continuous duty.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
I was very disillusioned by my first air-assisted airless, like many painters, was a 395 Finish Pro. I spent a ton of money on it. 3 months after I bought it, they came out with the one that did have a tiny tank on it, so at least it wasn't running 24/7.
Right.
It was loud, and the air cap was annoying, and it always got clogged in the little air holes. And we use that gun now as an airless gun.
Everybody does.
And that setup was a huge letdown for what air-assisted airless was all about. And then I got a Kremlin, and I was able to dial in my pressure, my fluid pressure, precisely at very low pressures, which you can't do with a 395. And I had enough air to actually atomize, and I had an air cap that was actually designed to spray paint well and be cleaned.
Yeah.
That I agree. That is something I've talked about before. How that is, you might as well just take your airless, buy a compressor, and buy the gun, and
would be
it's
better.
a much better.
Yeah. It was just something that I feel like they just commercialized and packaged and fed it to the contractor market because they could, but it's done a real disservice to the name of air-assisted airless.
I think there is a big gap between, and I'm gonna take some heat, whatever. There are two terms out there for for professions. One is called painter, and one is called finisher. And I don't know. I don't want to but house painter or painter shops at Sherwin-Williams and buys the paint there and paints houses. And a finisher is this is stereotypes, but a finisher is in a shop with a spray booth in a controlled setting. He's probably not buying his paint. If he is buying his paint from Sherwin-Williams, it's not from over the counter. It's all the stuff for the commercial stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And those two worlds, for me at least, as a house painter for a long time, that finishing world was so foreign, and they'll look down on painters and they'll talk crap, and it's like, but to me, we're applying coatings and trying to make them look nice, and there's not there shouldn't be a difference.
Yep.
So Graco came to the painters with this piece of technology that finishers would have all laughed at, and they did really well. And for me, it was a step up, I thought. And then when you find out what all the finishers are using and you start trying to copy them, it's like, what have I been doing?
Right.
So it is. I would like to see the finisher painter thing go away and everyone sort of just apply coatings at a high level.
Well, I think it all comes down to research, right? Looking at what's the best tool, what's the best coating for the job, what's the best SOP. Are you writing out standard operating procedures and being consistent? That separates the men from the boys right there. right? If you have a written process and you can repeat it, that's a finisher. A painter, it's got a station wagon and a extension pole and a roller in it, driving down.
See, you're coming from a world where 99% of your clients, if not all of them, are finishers.
I will tell you, when I got into the equipment industry, I thought, because I used to sell coatings architecturally and into the fine wood finishing market and all of that before I got into equipment. And I thought, like, on the first week, man, I'm going into like Boeing and stuff. This is going to be great because I'm going to stop dealing with these guys that are station wagon and a roller hanging out the back, right? And not taking care of their equipment. No, universally, painters just don't clean equipment. I went into, like, some of these aerospace places and you're just like, like, clean that. Like, what are you doing? So it's universal. If the guy doesn't care, he doesn't care. You have to actually care about what you're doing and be a skilled craftsman and care for your tools,
Yeah, and these finishers don't have a monopoly on craftsmanship, and although they do have a lot of passed down institutional knowledge that painters, if you will, would love to know about, and seeing the guy who's painting a house, especially as lots of painters now, I'm going to continue to just say that in air quotes, are trying to do more fine finishes and doing a lot of cabinet refinishing, right? Cabinet refinishing has become huge.
Yeah.
And so now you have these painters who are looking for finishing, like, techniques and equipment.
Yep.
And once you get there, it's like, well, why wouldn't we use this equipment for all of the trim on the house? Like, why are we spraying the trim different than we're spraying the cabinets? And I think social media is helping elevate the level of craftsmanship.
Yeah.
On all fronts. And a lot of it, I'm noticing, as my knowledge has increased, a lot of it has come from the finishing world, if you will.
Right. Yep. I will tell you, I painted the trim in my own house. I think I used Miller Paint, which is a Northwest brand. And it's just like a very hard acrylic enamel. I heated it through the inline heater and I sprayed it with an air assist. And it came out so much better. And I remember my dad actually was there and he was looking at me like, what is this contraption? I'm like, well, that's what we're going to paint the trim with. And it came out so much smoother. I used less paint, all those things. The thinner the viscosity, the less force I need on the paint to achieve atomization. So there's a direct transfer efficiency impact on thinner viscosity.
Yeah, so because finishing shops and air-assisted airless, true air-assisted airlesses are running in what, like 300 to 600 PSI range? Is that fair to say?
Typical, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some of these water-based coatings on the like the Malaysies and the Renners, I'm seeing guys creep up 700, 750. The waters need a little more oomph, it seems like, because their viscosities are all increasing from the manufacturers, it seems like, too.
But if you were to take a Graco 395 and try to dial it in to 580 PSI of fluid pressure and ask it to consistently keep that, it can't do it. It wasn't designed to do it.
No.
And that's what I think when I got my first air-assisted airless, and there I'm dialing in my fluid pressure to 430 PSI, and I can dial it in to, like, by 5 PSI increments. That's a very different setup than an airless from a 395 or a 440, where you just can't be that precise at those low of PSIs.
Correct. There's things in that design that would prevent you from being able to do that. Number one, the electric motor has too much torque to stay that accurate. Number two, an airless pump typically is what they call a chevron packing design, which you've all probably seen, where it's leather, Teflon stacked, and then there's a wiper packing and you're tightening it down. That creates friction. Let's just say this is your piston and this is the packing. That creates friction where it takes X amount of force to actually break that, right? If you look at the packing on like a Kremlin or a Wagner, that's what they call a self-adjusting seal, and it almost looks like kind of a clamshell. As the pressure increases, it self-tightens. When I let the pressure off, it loosens. So a general rule of thumb that we used to say is it was 2 psi on a self-adjusting seal to move up and down in any direction, and it was 50 psi to move in a chevron seal. Now, there's a purpose for both. You can't use a self-adjusting seal like that at 4,000 psi. It's going to blow it out. But it gives you a lot more control at the really low end, whereas the chevron seal can't do that. So it's just knowledge of knowing the tool for the job.
Yeah, I think as like painters like myself, when we get an air-assisted airless rig like the Wagner or the Kremlin, just the concept of spraying at 400 or 500 psi is foreign. It's not something that we've ever done, and I don't think
that
people
kick pull the trigger, right?
Yeah, that's what we're used to. Is
right.
You know, and to be fair, like the airless tips have come a long way, and those fine finished low pressure tips are very impressive, and you can be in the 1,200-1,300 psi range, and get a great finish sometimes. But there's no, it doesn't compare to the trigger pull and the control of a Golden Gun or a GM 4700. They're just very different, and I think it's hard as a painter. I didn't understand how different and how much more precise it could be. And then when we got my first one, I was like, this is insane. Where's this been?
Yeah.
So it's definitely interesting, and with now that I can combine the paint heater with that setup, boy, the sky's the limit.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing you get this running. What do you think? Another week or so, we'll do a special on this.
Yeah. I'm going to be documenting it heavily because I think it's very unique. I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Jack Andrews, who has been on this podcast. It was a 3-hour-long epic episode of nerding out on coatings, and he was the first person that talked to me about a paint heater. And because he had gone down that rabbit hole, and he's the first one that told me about a Wagner Cobra. So there you have to do some crazy research as a painter to get to these types of things. There's like this invisible wall between the finishers and the painters' knowledge, and we want to know all this stuff, but if you talk to Graco about how come you don't put a Merkur at the PDCA show, the guy's like, that's a whole other division of Graco. He's like, we're in competition with that division. He's like, I can talk to him if you want, but that's another division of Graco. And so the cabinet finishing section of Graco is a whole nother company. From the airless paint sprayers.
It's actually called the finishing division and the contractor division, and they're somewhat at odds. Sherwin-Williams, I worked for them for 7 years doing equipment and systems. They're the exact same way. They have the architectural house paint stores, and then they have what they now call Performance Coatings Group, and they don't even sell the same products. And if they find out a house paint store rep's been in a cabinet shop, there's a turf war. It's crazy. So you have to kind of know, hey, I got to go find XYZ store to get this kind of product, because if I go to my one around the corner, they're not going to know what I'm talking about. So it's
crazy. That's not helping the painter finisher. Like that's not helping me try up my game when there's a wall between the house painter division and the finishing division within the companies that are supplying me coatings, and so that's why I'm glad that I have this outlet of the podcast and the live show and Instagram to get this stuff out here, because I've been I'm always craving a better way, and when I started to find it, it's like more and more and more it's coming from the finishing world.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Let's see. Oh, this is not going to be for now. And that guy swore. I should read them before I put them up. Here we go. Is there a big difference between the blue and red air cap for the Wagner 4700?
Ah, great question. And actually, level 10, we've talked before. Um, so the blue air cap. So this is actually something I love about that Wagner GM 4700 gun. Like, I'll pick on Kremlin. They only have one air cap, and it's like everything must go through it. Wagner said, you know what? We're going to have an air cap for high viscosity coatings. That's the blue. And they have an air cap that's red for low viscosity coatings. Where that line is, nobody particularly knows. I've done some experimenting with guys like Eric Reason. He loves that blue air cap for all of his Malaysia because they're thicker water-based 2K coatings. He swears it's better than the red on all that. I would always normally start a guy in a red air cap that's a wood finisher. And less specifically, he said, I'm shooting something that's very viscous and known to be. Just you're going to get a little bit better transfer efficiency with red, but that blue will break up that thicker viscosity stuff. So there again, it's nice they make an option.
Yeah, and so now that we're on that gun, let's talk about that gun a little bit. That has a reversible tip, not in the way that we would think of it from a Graco Rack 10 tip that literally just flips around, spray it out, flip it back.
That's called a switch tip. It's not a switch tip. It's still a tip.
But it's
you can physically take the tip out, manually flip it around, and put the cap back on, and unplug your tip, with pressure. So it's a reversible flat tip.
Which is, there's definitely an advantage to that.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have one of those little tiny needles around.
The other thing that I love about that gun, there's no wearing seals under the air cap. The other ones out there have Teflon O-rings behind the tip, Teflon O-ring on both sides of the nozzle, Teflon O-rings in the air cap. And every time you put that on, the Teflon has no memory, and it compresses. And when it gets flat, it loses its seal, and then you get paint up in the air passages of the gun. Wagner, on that 4700 gun, has two very hard plastic permanent seals. They are replaceable because if you drop it, they're hard enough they can break if you drop it, but they don't wear from putting the cap on and off, which I think is a brilliant design. And one of them's almost $6, and one of them's $8. So just really the cost of ownership. If you've owned an Excite gun, you're probably used to spending a couple $100 a month on parts.
So let's talk about Wagner.
Okay.
As a painter who only saw Wagner in Home Depot with this crappy little paint sprayer that was a joke
Sure.
to most. It was a revelation when I learned that Wagner is one of the, highest end, high quality, full of technology sprayer companies. They've done a terrible job marketing. Apparently, I think that's what we found. Kremlin and Wagner does not market to the residential painter.
No, not at all.
Which I think is insane, and I told Kremlin that a lot, and I think that they're missing out on a lot. But explain to the people about Wagner and that it's not that what we think it is of it as.
Well, first off, I think Wagner on the finishing side has done a horrible job for 20 plus years in the North American market. They've hired and replaced general managers for years. Like, I think the longest stint I ever saw one have was 5 years. And that rolling door policy never gives anybody a good feeling. So Wagner is a huge company, and they're actually a not-for-profit company, which is very interesting. It's the Joseph A. Wagner Foundation. The guy who founded it died. He had no heirs, and so he made the entire company a living trust. So all of their profits go to educational foundations, and that's true for the contractor side, for all that. Yeah, it's kind of a mind blower, right?
They have the worst marketing department in the history of a company.
Yeah, they really should talk about that. Okay, so in Europe, they're Swiss and they're German. That's where all the factories that build all that are, and they put all of their technology over into that European market with the wood finishers and the glass shops and the window joineries and all of that kind of stuff. In the U.S., they started the contractor division, and it really was more of a we got to get there before Graco does mentality. Titan popped up with a lot of success against Graco in the early 90s. They bought Titan, right? So Wagner owns Titan. Speedflow, same thing. Kind of anybody who begins to get big enough in the contractor market, it's either Graco or Wagner are going to buy them and compete with each other. PPG and Sherwin-Williams do the exact same thing in the paint world, right? If a coating company gets big enough, one of them's got to buy it before the other one does. So they, in that contractor market, compete like that with each other. But Wagner they've always kept the industrial wood and high-end finishing side, pneumatic powered pumps and air assist pumps completely separate from contractor. They've dabbled with some very stripped down, like Titan had one, and I'm trying to think what they call it. They had an air assist version that was contractor, but it was like the air caps were lame and missing holes and things like that were just made for cheap. So the European stuff, when I've been over there, I've been to Italy about 4 times for finishing, bringing customers over for automated machinery and things like that. I always saw more Wagner than anything else. I'm seeing a Neste Iwata over in Europe making pumps and guns. I'm talking, it's pretty impressive. And I used to, like 10 years ago, I saw quite a bit of Kremlin. I'm seeing less every time I've gone over there in the shops. Wagner did buy CA Technologies about 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. And that's been a good marriage. They moved all of the North American industrial wood stuff all into the CA Technologies building out of Colorado. So good central location. It's still removed from that Minneapolis contractor division, so that they're operating separately, which I think is good. But Wagner, I think, has 17 or 19 divisions as a company. They're absolutely massive, several $billion, I believe.
And it's amazing. And if they would ever market to, I think that, I can tell you most of the guys that are on here and everyone that I follow and I know, like, we want to know about this stuff. We want to, like, we'll spend a few extra thousand to get a pump that's going to give us a better result and that's going to last time.
I'm laughing at the paint school. Wagner has a terrible name in the residential painting industry. Yeah, I know, because I sell Wagner on the industrial side, and I have to go in and overcome that in the sales process of, this is not Wagner with the buzz gun that you get at Home Depot. This is Swiss, German-made, engineered, and once someone actually sprays it, they go, oh, yeah, this isn't the throwaway junk that they're pushing on me at the Home Depot, But
yeah, the $60 paint eater, the Wagner paint eater.
The Power Pro roller and all that crap. No, this is coming out of Switzerland and Germany.
They did buy Titan. Okay, so we have 1 minute and 48 seconds left on this 1 hour. Yep. I've learned to just shut it off now. We'll reset it before they cut me off. Okay. So I'm going to end this, and we'll do the same thing again, and we'll keep talking.
All right. Good.
All right.